Afternoon, Nick.
Hello. So I haven't just run into my chair and landed just ready for a webinar. I've
Definitely not.
been here, and I have been prepared. So welcome everybody. We are live on LinkedIn. So watch your language and check what you're sharing. But otherwise, welcome everybody to this webinar, where I'm delighted to be joined with our Head of Client Delivery, Jordan Saxby. And we are going to be talking about moving beyond pulse surveys to measuring the moments that matter. And we're going to be talking about where pulse surveys have their place and they're great. What do they not perform so well at? What are moments? And what can you do in your organization to go away tomorrow, go away today, and start thinking about employee engagement, employee experience, employee voice, employee listening a little bit differently. So Jordan, love to hear more about you. Would you like to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, definitely. So, head of client delivery here at PX Hub. I've been here a few months now, but really my career history up to this point has involved quite a lot of both being on the agency side, sort of working for tech companies like this, building employee surveys, working as a consultant in this area. But I've also worked in-house for some large English brands as well. So working for Asda and for Green King most recently. So I experienced both on that client side, understanding the challenges that you face trying to land a listening strategy inside your own organization, but also have that benefit of the broad experience you get from working with lots of different clients.
Lovely, thank you. And a bit about the People Experience Hub. So we're on a mission to help organizations give their people a voice and help them understand what's going on in the organization so that they can build healthier, higher performing cultures. And we do that through a combination of our awesome technology, and I would say it was awesome, but our awesome technology and our people services. So where we support people. So let's kick things off. Pulse surveys, they've been around for quite a long time. So before I started this company, they were around. I think we were originally, the time I saw pulse surveys, we were told that they were solving a problem, which was the annual survey. We were going through a period of time when I think everything annual was the annual this is dead, the annual that is dead,
Yep.
move to micro things. But let's talk about an open view about pulse surveys, Jordan. What are pulse surveys there to solve, and what are they great at, and what are they not so great at?
So I'll get the quick negative out of the way first, and then we can go move into some of the positive. Like one of the things I think pulse surveys are best at out of any other methodology is creating survey fatigue. They are really challenging tools to use effectively because what was quite often the case, you said at the beginning around sort of annual surveys dead, everyone needs to move to regular pulse surveys, is first off, you lose a lot of the fidelity that you had in an annual survey. So don't get to ask as many questions often. And instead, you're asking people to fill in a survey regularly. The challenge with that is how frequently can your organization actually take action off the back of that? How much can you change your strategy? Much can you implement new policies, new processes, new HR avenues of action or leadership and management training? You're not going to be able to do that every month. And so employees are going to keep filling something in and they're going to hear silence back. Maybe they see the results, but then nothing really changes very quickly. And it's quite hard to keep up that momentum. So that's the real challenge that pulse surveys brought when they kind of came into the arena and were pitched as a sort of, you don't need to run an annual survey anymore, you can just run pulse surveys. That was the real challenge that we had from them. When we think then about what they're great at, pulse surveys were always, for me, they're scalpels. They're really good at being precise. They're great for precision. But you need to be targeted. So some of the great pulse surveys I've seen over the years have been pulse surveys that are a follow-on to an event, for example. Say you've got your senior leadership team together, you've had this big event, and you want to understand how that event went down, what the senior leadership team felt coming out of the event, what their engagement was like out after that event. Great use of a pulse survey. Or maybe you want to follow up with a team off the back of an annual survey. Or maybe there's something going wrong in part of your business. Say, for example, your drivers' population are really unhappy. They're out on the road all the time. They're struggling to feel part of the company. Pulse surveys are great for that kind of thing as well, because you can go in and be targeted and think, okay, I want to target that group, get the understanding of what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and then we can take action at that local level. And it's that connection between, you do a survey, but how are you taking action off the back of it to show people that things are changing? So that, I think, is where the pulse surveys can be really great and create a lot of power, but they're definitely not a replacement for your annual surveys, regardless of what the marketing said over the last decade.
I'm glad. I'm, I'm glad you said that for a couple of reasons. But one of the main reasons was I always used to scratch my head about that, and I used to scratch my head a lot about, you know, creating more noise, creating more static. Why is that a good thing when we're in a really busy world? And whether it's first line managers, whether it is HR leaders, HR managers, HR people, the people that ultimately have to take some analysis and then take action. Why create more noise more often, which surely must detract from taking action at the right
Yeah,
time when you need to take that. And I think there's another webinar about what are the weaknesses of an annual versus what are the
yeah,
strengths of an annual,
definitely.
because what we can't do is um, be binary in this. We can't say that one size fits all.
Completely.
And I think my experience of pulse surveys within an employee listening approach or an employee listening strategy is, when you think of it as a tool as part of your overall toolbox that you have on
Yeah,
employee listening. And be honest, this is your tech toolbox, not necessarily every part of
yeah,
the employee listening approach. It is a really useful tool for the things that you've just said
yeah.
around targeting groups, targeting demographics. And actually there's nothing wrong with putting some cadence in that, is there? There's nothing wrong with
No,
it might be a one-off survey, but there's nothing wrong about putting a true pulse in, a pulse
yeah.
cadence in.
And you've also got to be aware of the processes you have within your organization as well. Like, if you are one team setting up and sending out these surveys, doing one a month might be the carrying capacity of your current team. So that cadence can still be really useful, but it's not once a month to every single employee. It's once a month in a targeted, precise manner to be able to get really crisp insights to take action off the back of.
Brilliant, thank you. And it brings us on to moments. So when we started thinking about a solution to solve the problem of asking everybody everything all of the time,
Yeah.
and then moving to getting a little bit more focused on the way we use Pulse, the natural next step was asking more about specific moments in a journey. But if you were to describe for our audience, and I'd love to hear from our audience as well, so ask questions, fire stuff through. But when we talk about moments, what are we talking about?
So a moment survey is, let's start with the idea. A moment is for this intent and purposes, it's a survey. It's going out and understanding somebody's perceptions. But what do we mean when we say moments? Moments are particular points within an employee life cycle where an employee's experience might fundamentally change. So it might be that they've just joined an organization, and many organizations run joiner surveys already. So many of them have one of these moments already in place. Maybe it's someone leaving an organization. You want to understand their experience, their views on the company, and their experience of leaving. Again, that's another moment that quite a lot of places are already surveying, or they have exit interviews and they're doing it in an even deeper way. But they're not the only times when an employee experience can change. If you become, say, a new manager, if you become if you come back off a sick leave, if you have just had maternity leave or paternity leave, if you have been through performance management, maybe you've just got a new manager, maybe you yourself have changed jobs to a different team in the organization. All of these are things that are going to fundamentally change your employee experience. And I think that's what the problem that moments, I think, solves really well is when you think about how does an organization change, like the experience of employees. If you think about the big annual survey, you integrate that into strategy, but it is a strategic tool. It's a big thing that enables you to really go into detail, but you need to integrate it over a long period of time. And it catches everyone at one moment in their moments now sounding weird because I've said it so many times. You catch people in one instance,
Moment.
one day, 1 week, 1 month of the year. But the other time that an employee's experience can change rather than this slow strategic shift in a culture is when something's happened to the employee themselves.
Hmm.
Maybe I've been off sick and I've had a really bad experience where I've not had good keeping in touch from my employer, where I feel like they've been pressuring me to come back before I was well enough. Those experiences are important. They shape how you view the company you work for. And that's and if you're not measuring that, if you're not tapping into those experiences, understanding those experiences, you're really missing a trick as to actually how your culture operates on the day to day.
And I'm hoping everyone can see the screen I'm sharing, because can you see it?
No, it's not appeared yet. Oh, there we go. Just a little bit of a lag.
A little bit of a lag. So we've created a visual representation of that, which is, um, I think, exactly some of those points that you made. And there's a couple of bits on here which I think I mean, it feels like there's a lot on here, and but there's a couple of bits I pick up on this, which is that new joiner, the onboarding survey. Like, there's a couple of examples there, like a warm welcome and 3 months in. So a moment can be a continuation event,
Yeah.
as in somebody is joining, they're going through a first moment, then 3 months in, something different. I guess it could be 9 months in as well, and 12 months in. That what's right for that organization at that time, for that new joiner cadence. Our newest people, when do we know that they're properly bedded in, engaged
Yeah.
with our values, our purpose, our mission, the role they do? When do they know they're going to be successful?
And it's interesting. What you cannot even do is when you're setting these things up, start with one thing like this. So start maybe at 3 months in and see actually what that difference is over time. How integrated has someone become in part of your business? Maybe even compare it to your annual survey and go, how integrated are they compared to your average employee or your average employee in this area of the organization? And maybe they're not that integrated yet. Maybe 3 months isn't the right time where you've got people involved. That gives you two really interesting opportunities. The first is, okay, how do we help onboard people better? And that's a great piece of feedback that you've got from the survey. But also, there's real value to going, let's shift out the survey further. Let's check in at 6 months instead. Or maybe let's ask a 3 month and a 6 month survey to start to see where do they actually become embedded into the organization and start like behaving in a data sense, like like a normal employee, like a standard employee who's been there for a few years.
And it's interesting as well, because I'm a data hound. I like getting all the data, and I like analyzing that data, and I like jumping into it, and creating it into visuals that I can then start spotting trends and things like that. So I love all the moments, and I know that's not right, though. So how does an organization choose the moments that are right for them, right for their people? What's the start? Well, how do people start this? So if we were saying tomorrow, think about this, where do you start?
I think the thing you need to look at first is like what is where do you feel like pain points might be emerging in your employee processes? Like where do you think the issues might be occurring? Do you have like a high level of levers within the first 90 days in your business? Because at that point, that's a real question around is your onboarding doing what it needs to do? And you should be thinking about something like a new starters survey. Is it that you've got a retention issue more broadly? At that point, exit surveys can be a powerful thing. Maybe you've just implemented some new policies around family leave and to reflect government changes. That again is a really good motivation to say, right, let's start with a return from family leave policy, return from family leave moment survey. So that's one thing to consider is actually what do you feel is going to give you lots of value straight away? Because that'll help you prove the return on investment to your employer as well for doing this kind of thing, for sending out these kinds of surveys. There's also another thing, which is there something that you see your exec, maybe your CEO, maybe your HRD has a bee in their bonnet about, well, maybe think about that moment survey as well, for whatever they were thinking. Because again, it helps you build that credibility within your organization. So that's one thing to consider when you build it, thinking about what moments to go for. The second thing is trying not to do too much too fast, because you and your team might not be used to running these kinds of life cycle surveys, might not be used to integrating them into how your business takes action and changes. And so it can be better to do a few things really powerfully and show their value, rather than thinking, well, we need to measure, we're going to measure 9, 10 different things, collect lots of data, but not actually take action off the back of them. So it's always about that balance.
And I guess with any, when we start looking at whether it's employee life cycle, colleague journey, however it's described in an organization. I saw someone recently who had a wonderful job title of colleague journey mapper,
That's
and
great. Yeah.
their whole role was about understanding touch points, interaction points, and far broader than maybe just employee experience, but also technology touch points and
Yeah.
beyond that. And I think organizations are moving more to understanding all of this. And I think so there's a couple of problems within what you've described that I think, we'll move on to showing how we visualize stuff like this and how
Yeah.
it's useful to talk about that. But let's describe some of those problems. And I think when I think about this as an ex HR professional who was also time poor and trying to get the best out of everything and make change, the issues I tended to have was too much data with too much to take action at.
Yeah.
I had to manually do most of this stuff. So exit interviews were manual. We still hear
Yeah.
about that exit interviews being manual, new joiner surveys being manual. Like if you suddenly said we're going to map bereavement returners, people who have just put a map B1 in as part of their parental leave journey, that's a moment. People that have just been promoted as a moment, means that you've got to collate the data, means that you've got to, it almost becomes an industry. And I think
Yeah.
kind of when we looked at that, we said, we can't create another industry to
Yeah.
introduce into what is already a team that have enough on their plate and enough going on. But what we have to do is introduce something that enables them to say, I understand the experience that's going through, that someone's going through. I understand where the friction level is, but actually it's more likely to be palatable and therefore something that can be solved. And I would probably say that we solved that through automation, about technology automation, taking feeds from HR systems, from
And
people
that's
data.
and that's the real benefit, isn't it? That this is why Moments is such a good product for the current age compared to previous eras of running surveys and systems, is that people's HRIS systems have got a lot better. We have a lot more data now, and that enables you to automate many more things rather than having to run through those manual processes. Now, someone's putting in a lever thing on your HR system of choice, that's creating flags, that's automating its feed through into, say, our survey system, and that lever survey has gone out to them. There's no manual collation process involved. But that's because technology has enabled us to do that in a much cleverer way and a much subtler way than you would have had to do in
Mm.
the past.
and and I think as well I've seen it where we've likened it to, if you were going to Pizza Express and you were being asked a customer feedback survey, if you've just walked past Pizza Express, you might be asked a brand survey, which is, are you aware of the brand? That's fantastic. But you wouldn't be asked if you enjoyed the pizza. You'd
Yeah,
only be asked that if you'd experienced the pizza, and if the answer was no, then maybe you'd be asked more questions. And I think when it comes to solving problems, for the majority of people in an organization, and I remember a quote from Rob Robson, which was, culture is relatively stable.
yeah,
So culture is something that moves by small degrees over time,
yeah,
whereas experience is volatile. And
yeah.
experience happens in the moment and it's far more volatile. And therefore, if you get feedback from somebody that says, the process of going off on maternity didn't work for me, number one is you're giving the voice to an individual. So it's less about the voice of the whole organization and more about the voice of the person who's experienced something. But also as a HR team or as a tactical delivery team of that strategy, I'm going somewhere and I'm solving something that actually is solvable. I'm solving the policy, the process, the training for the line manager, the training for support teams. I'm fixing how things go in the system, and these are things that can actually be fixed in hours or days, rather than months and months and months of work on a bigger culture piece.
And it's giving that empowerment to the teams who can take action. So when you think about setting up your moment surveys, one thing that we'll always talk about with our clients is what processes are they integrating into? Where is it, both from a just in general, how do you communicate out, say that you're going to get a survey about this, but also on the back end, how are you going to integrate action planning? And this isn't about doing a 3-point action plan or all of that onerous stuff. It's about how do you look at the data and go, we need to fix this and fix it. A great example here is in levers surveys, because actually in a previous when I was on client side, I really saw the power of this, where we had an exit survey come in and it talked about what was a really difficult problem, where a manager had been completely out of hand. They've really not given a good experience. There was some real risks around things like discrimination and issues with this employee. And we had an employee relations team, the HR business partner. They had that data within a day. And that person who just left the organization was contacted and actually rejoined the organization 2 days later, because the problem had been fixed. The manager had been dealt with in one way or another, and the employee joined a different team, and it created this experience where you're immediately removing retention problem. You removed a load of HR risk and reputational risk for the company, but also you helped that person who'd had a terrible experience, made them so much more positive that they wanted to come back and join the company again, even though they'd had a difficult experience before. And that's the real power of these kinds of surveys, where it's that individual case, that response. And if you integrate it into your actions, that's the sorts of experiences you can create.
I think it's a really good that's a really good point, a really good example, and it's we just had a comment come in from Rob, which is any stages of a development program, a go live. It doesn't have to be traditional employee life cycle stuff. And I think there is power in that, which is if there's a trigger, an event, even if we then have to do something manual, but if there's a trigger and an event, it can be automated. And I think this probably is a good time. I mean, and I'll remind everyone that you can download the Moments ebook that has the visualization that we showed earlier. I'm sure we'll share that with the people that have signed up and have attended. We'll send something out after this as well, so that everyone's aware. But I'm aware that when I share something, there's a slight lag. So I'm going to share. I'm going to share my.
While you're sharing your screen, the Download the Moments ebook pop-up has appeared. So if you scan that QR code, that's going to enable you to go on and get the ebook itself, to see our thinking about moments and to read this in a bit more detail. So some of you are only going to fully engage with content when it's written. Some people prefer things like this webinar. So we wanted to make sure that you've got the opportunity to digest the information in the way that works for you best.
Now, can you see the screen?
I still can't see your screen, Nick.
This is screen sharing is
there we go.
Is a gift, right? So it feels like there might be a slight lag. So I don't know the experience everyone is receiving is the experience that I'm showing. So I will apologize for that now. So moments has to be visualized slightly differently, and what we can see here is some moments tiles where lever, welcome to Fresh Fusion. Fresh Fusion is our example company here, so that's maybe 2 weeks in, 3-month check-in. Some other moments here as well around parental leave, return to work after sickness, promotion, first check-in. I'm going to focus actually on probably the welcome 2 weeks in and 3 months in. So let's just bring these up, because I think as we start exploring the visualization, when we can see two of those moments together on a screen, and I'm just going to zoom in. So let's just zoom into that. So we can see that. Well, I mean, the power for me of seeing this on the screen is the ability to start driving comparisons.
Completely. And I think that's where a lot of the power comes from, is understanding where you have more parts of a sort of a section of an employee journey. So you're thinking about sort of a new joiner and throughout that journey into an organization. Those comparisons are really powerful because you can see how someone's opinion is changing over time.
And let's just take a look at that. And,
Mm,
in this example, we can see, say, on organizational effectiveness and purpose at the top there, that we can see that, from welcome to 3 months in, there's been a smallish change, but we can see for purpose that from 2 weeks in to 3 months in, the purpose has had quite a substantial improvement over
yeah,
time. And looking at that, I mean, I know from our insights report that purpose is one of the biggest drivers of engagement, overall engagement, whether that's retention or motivation or commitment. So, I mean, I would look at that as a HR practitioner and start thinking about how can I bring purpose forward
yeah.
in that light. I mean, it's only a 12-week period there, but how can I bring that forward? What's the story we're telling 2 weeks in? Is the focus on getting ready for the role and then they learn the purpose as they grow? I'd want to know a little bit more about that. But I guess when I look
And a
down the
lot of
bottom,
organizations, when you think about that point, they will have a line manager do like a basically what is normally quite a standard induction, and it very much does focus on the role. And then there'll usually be like, especially in large organizations, there'll be like an event every few months where it's like, welcome to the organization. And that's when you tell them the stories about the organization. That's when you build the belief in the purpose and the vision. And if you're getting results like you can see on the screen here, and you have that sort of setup, that kind of raises that red flag of, are we doing things in the wrong order? Are we not starting with why? How can we change the manager's part in the induction to be able to tell some of that story quicker to help build that engagement and that connection sooner?
and it is really powerful. And the flip of that is seeing where there's a reduction. So we can see
Yeah,
that there's a reduction in perception against people practices. So things like benefits, pay, holidays, anything around that respect.
yeah.
That tends to take a drop from when somebody joins, and I guess that makes sense. I'm super excited. I'm on
It's the
board.
end of the honeymoon period.
Yeah, yeah, 100. And actually, it probably is. It shines a light on how well the recruitment applicant team,
Yeah,
the processing through interview, that differential. Maybe it shows a light on, where are we doing incredibly well about bringing someone in, and
exactly.
then when they land in the organization, there's a reality hit.
Yeah.
I,
And
I,
you can see there as well, like engagement, whilst it was a small shift, the engagement had declined as well. And when you look at any employee surveys and your big annual surveys, anything like that, that's the sort of typical thing that you'd see where you have this brief moment where people are super connected, super positive because they've only been there 2 weeks. And then once the reality embeds, you can start to see some of the differences and some of the challenges of the day-to-day job start to emerge.
and I think it's. I mean, I'm going to bring up a comparison here. So let's keep the 3 month check in, and maybe let's bring in the promotion first check in. So, in this example, what are we looking at here? We're looking at somebody who's new to the organization, who doesn't know the organization 3 months in, somebody who probably does know the organization, who's just received a promotion
Yeah,
3 months in. And we can start looking at that journey as well, can't we? So we can see that, you know, purpose, post promotion is super high as a comparison. Enjoyment is super high. People practice is actually super high. So somebody who's gone through a promotion is scoring positively on things. But we can see down at the bottom there that autonomy, perception of organizational effectiveness, well-being, connection, post promotion have dropped.
yeah. And I think this always makes me think of one of the interesting points of this data, which is you can never be entirely sure where the chicken and the egg is with promotions. Where is it that people become a manager or get promoted and they become more connected into the organization? So the purpose hires the scorer. Purpose scores are higher. Maybe that they come across some new challenges with the systems and processes, so your organizational effectiveness and your autonomy starts to decline. Or is it the other way around? Is it that we're promoting people who know how to talk the talk because they feel connected into the purpose of the business? But actually, we're also promoting people who want to shake things up. Maybe we're promoting the people who are frustrated to the point with organizational systems and with their autonomy that they're going to keep climbing the career ladder to be able to gain that autonomy and to change those systems. And this is valuable when you start to think about, oh, well, what are the free text comments saying about this promotion population? Or how do we go out and talk to people on the back of this survey to understand that journey, to fix that? Is it chicken or the egg problem? Like, is it because we're recruiting people in a certain way, or is it about that promotion experience itself? And you said you're a data hound earlier, Nick. I'm much the same. And it's when you get access to this kind of data, it just raises all these interesting questions where you're like, oh, let's dig in and really understand how we can improve this experience for people.
Maybe use a pulse survey, for example, to reach out to that management and non-management population, do a little bit of A/B testing there to talk about autonomy and organizational effectiveness, maybe jump into previous survey data. And I
Or,
think,
just go have some conversations.
well, yeah, technology isn't always the answer. Let's make sure we're clear on that. People are people, and people love to interact with people. This is a starting point for collating it. And I think the important thing for me when we visualize data like this is that anyone could look at it and ask those questions where they can see that 2 points are close together, that they're relatively the same, 2 points are far apart, that actually there's a question or a conversation to be had here. And I also like that, we can start tracking it over to, if you have enough data, enough promotions in this example, enough new joiners, you can put an initiative in. And over time, you can start tracking, did that initiative for my people who join the business start bearing fruit? If I put something in June, could I see something change in September? Did I see something come through? And
another thing that you can think about here, and it's why I really like promotion as an example for a moment that gives you lots of great data, is to think about things like your diversity within your organization. Because a lot of businesses are struggling to promote talent who is maybe from a Black background or promote women throughout the more senior levels of their organization. And actually, if you're gathering data and you can filter between those populations to be able to say, actually, what is the experience of women who've just been promoted? What is the experience of people from a sort of Black background who have been promoted in our organization? Are we setting these people up for success, or actually are they having a much worse experience at the beginning of their journey? So, beginning of their senior journey, because there's this idea of the glass cliff, isn't there, where people get promoted, people with more diverse characteristics get promoted into roles where they're almost doomed to fail. And so you really need to understand if this is starting to happen, if people are getting into those promotion positions and then having a really negative experience straight away, that they're probably at risk of that. And that could be a pattern that you've built into your organization without even knowing it.
I think it's there's some powerful stuff there. And I think, coming from data and being able to explore things and things that are similar as well. I mean, we could have lived in that dashboard for a little bit longer and looked at stuff, but things like, when do people return to work after a period of absence from work? And that absence might be from extended holidays, from career breaks, it might be from sabbaticals, it might be from long-term sickness, it might be from parental leave. There are many reasons that somebody will return to work. But being able to hold those up against each other and to say, when somebody comes back to work, what is the support that they need? What do they need to know while they're off to keep them connected, to keep them in the loop, to ensure that they are still engaged in what they do with us and what we do with them? And when they do return, have we got that right? Have we got that right for them? And start comparing like for like, even where the situation is very slightly different.
Yeah. And at the core of it, what gets measured gets done, gets acted upon. And so if you think there is an issue with part of your organization, so say you think, actually, I'm a HR practitioner, I'm running a lot of different things, I'm spinning 10 different plates. I know that our inductions aren't great and I really want to change them. But if you don't have the data to back that up, you're going to find it difficult to be able to carve out the time to say, no, I have to drop this other thing so I can fix inductions. But gathering that data enables you to put the argument together. It enables you to prioritize and actually make things happen. And the other thing is, if you just get some free text comments from someone going through an experience like return to work from maternity leave, for example, and they're negative and they've had a really bad time, putting that in front of, in an anonymized fashion, ideally, putting that in front of your CEO, putting that in front of your senior leaders, and going, is this the experience that we want someone to have at this point in their
Mhm.
journey? It can be very powerful to help change mindsets and build a groundswell of action within an organization to change something that you might already know needs fixing.
I think it's and Ted's fielded some questions from other sources as well that's come in. So someone's come in via Ted on, can you use moments data to benchmark against other businesses and their similar moments?
So yes, if there a lot of the questions that you're going to be asking within moments are going to be similar across lots of businesses. So you can start to build, we're building up these benchmark databases as we speak. Some of the moments might be more unique to your organization, or you might be trailblazing on that, asking that moment, and you won't get that benchmarking information quite yet. But that doesn't mean it's never going to come as well, because as you run these surveys and we build up the case for other employers to build them as well, then your benchmarking capability improves too.
Hmm. And one of the things that I've talked about before and that I quite like around, if we think about this as almost scales of dropping down into data, where annual surveys is the classic. We're going to ask everybody lots of questions, but maybe just a few questions over specific factors or indices. Pulse surveys more targeted, maybe around a demographic group that we want to speak to or around a subject that we want to explore. And then moments is almost that, the voice of the individual in amongst the voice of everybody else, because you may have something like a surrogacy policy in your family friendly policies, and that surrogacy policy is in place but has never been tested. Nobody has utilized it, nobody has gone through that. And then, in your annual survey and maybe in pulse surveys, you will ask everybody, do you feel that we have good family friendly policies? And people will say, yes, I'm proud to work for a company that has a great surrogacy policy, because they feel proud to work for that company. That's brilliant. So in terms of the overall experience and perception of us as an organization, it's doing that job. And then you have one person go through the policy and they give their feedback that it was awful or it was amazing. And you either can celebrate or fix.
Yeah.
But that CEO standing up at the employee town forum or at a company wide event to say, we have changed our surrogacy policy because only one person gave us feedback, but that one person mattered, and that one person's impact on our policies and our procedures was enough for us to fix it and change it and make it better.
Yeah.
Because if it's better for them, it's better for everybody, and it's future proofed. And I think there's a power in that which you don't get from other technology listening methods.
Yeah.
In
And like when we talk about something like an annual survey, that's a really great comparison point, because it's really hard sometimes to do you said we did off the back of an annual survey, because what you actually often done is gone, we've changed our strategy slightly based on employee feedback, or we've prioritized one piece of HR activity over another piece of HR activity, which is still happening 7 months from now. And so telling that story to your employees can be quite challenging. It can be quite tricky to be able to say, we have taken this very complicated decision to reprioritize some elements of our strategy. All great stuff, all going to lead to great outcomes, but your employees aren't going to feel that. Whereas if you can go and say, actually, we have changed something we've changed this policy off the back of direct feedback, that's brilliant. Or even if you're a HR practitioner in a team within your organization, you get survey results back and go, oh, this person's had a bad experience. We need to help and we need to improve that person's experience. You go and have that conversation with them. Suddenly, to that person, it's like, oh, something's obviously happening because I put my feedback in, someone's been reading it, and they've come to me and we've had that great conversation to try and change the experience for me myself, but also maybe people who go through it in the future. And that just creates some really powerful experiences for employees who've gone through different changes in your business.
Yeah, it is very powerful, and that whole approach of, this is a great score in our annual survey because 82% of people said yes, they were favourable to it, they strongly agreed or they agreed.
Yeah.
and 82% is an amazing benchmark for any organization. So this is an area we should celebrate. And the reality is 18% of people disagreed or were
Yeah.
neutral, depending on how the scoring works. But there are people out there who are saying it frustrates me, but the topic is so big that
Yeah.
it's about organization wide, far reaching, whereas moments focuses on that individual experience, which we have already said is more volatile and therefore should be treated with care, understood, but taken action on will mean something more when somebody's been through that. And this was
Definitely.
never this was never about us doing more than sharing our concept of moments. We have a great webinar next month as well, Jordan, with yourself, which is going to be a follow-up to this, but around how do you develop your employee listening
Yeah.
strategy? If somebody wants to, could you give a 2-minute summary on what they're going to get from that webinar?
So when you build an listening strategy, it can be really easy to just try and think about, oh, we want to run 3 surveys, or we want to run an annual survey and maybe a joiners survey, and that is the way you go into your strategy. In the webinar, we're instead going to talk about how do you start with your organization strategy and drill down through your HR strategy and build out your employee listening strategy from that direction. But also, we'll think about your stakeholder maps because you are going to have so many people in your organization who you need to feed data to, who you need to influence, who you want to change, and in the end, who you want to come to you and ask questions and have hypotheses. And if you start to build up use cases for those stakeholders, they become allies, they become advocates for your team inside the organization. And that's what can lead to some really great career development, can lead to some great listening outcomes and makes your job much easier. So we're going to look at both of those sides of things on how you build that listening strategy to provide that value.
And I think it will be a really good session about how do you start integrating and dropping in um, things like where does Pulse live, where does Moments live, where does non-tech live. So it'll be really good
Yeah,
stuff. So we'll share that. We'll share that with everybody. So we've got some Q&A. We've got some questions off the queue coming in anyway,
that's
and we
great.
might provide the answers to those. So Deborah has joined and has asked a couple of questions. So in reverse order, what about qual answers when you come into moments?
So qualitative feedback is really important. I think it's particularly important for moments where you are gathering comments to understand people's raw experiences. Um, and when you're looking at analyzing that data, so the tools and the surveys themselves collect raw comments as well, collect qualitative answers as well, and analyzes them mathematically. But you can go in and read the comments individually. And actually, one thing that's really powerful within our platform is trigger words for qualitative answers, where you can have specific words that come out that if they've been put in a comment are flagged for you when you go into the system. So it enables you to really quickly identify some of those hotspots or really challenging responses that you've got back as well.
Brilliant. And I think um, Deborah's also asked, what do you do when management just don't get it? When they just don't get it? And it's good news. We're 100% better than last year. 10% trust to 20% trust. Um, what do you do? Do you have any advice on how you take managers through that, or is that a next webinar will reveal all? No, let's not be clickbaity.
No, let's not be clickbaity. I think there's some things you can think about here. You have power to influence within your organization. If your managers don't get it, in some ways there are some difficult conversations that you have to have with those populations and talk about the ways in which the 80% of people who have a lack of trust, how is that going to be undermining the way the organization is working and how you're achieving your goals. um, Sometimes managers will just say something as well, possibly as a joke, possibly off the cuff, that they don't exactly mean, and that like 10 to 20% trust comment, hopefully that manager is kicking themselves about it afterwards. But it's important to keep anchoring the narrative. So when I say anchoring the narrative, it's about how do you keep going back to what are the total amounts here that we're talking about. instead of talking about percentages, maybe talk about number of people and say 600 people in our organization don't trust us.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of moment takes it away from this like hypothetical percentage change sort of world and anchors it into people. And that can help you to shift some of that narrative. But I'm not going to lie, Deborah, that's a real challenge, is building that over time within an organization if managers currently aren't on the journey.
And I guess it's interesting, some of the stuff you said, and we got another question from Juliet that I'll come back to, is when we're thinking about moments, particularly, we've seen a lot in the news recently about inclusion practices rollback and DEI and all of this stuff. It's really interesting, and that kind of, when I look at being a data-led approach and evidence-based, that I think things like moments allows you to start looking at experiences at an individual level that get in the way of somebody or one group going through something. So we can be really clear that the only person putting a MAP-B1 in is somebody who is pregnant. So we know that is a very specific group within an organization, and the experience that they are going to go through enables us to get more data on how to solve problems for a group rather than for a wider group. And I think that there's a lot in moments that is around that. It's, I hope that as we start to progress through 2025, less of the hyperbole around what large faceless organizations are doing on inclusion gets put in the bin, and more around what are better organizations doing to move forward on this stuff and things like this.
And I think that's where the frustration comes from, where a lot of the backlash comes from, is this feeling that blanket changes, blanket training, blanket policies aren't meeting the needs of anybody in these organizations. That's where the pushback tends to be coming from, the good faith pushback, I must clarify. And so actually having the data to understand how to be targeted just gives you a lot more ability to make changes that are not going to create backlash, whilst actually having a more beneficial effect on the populations that are affected.
Brilliant, thank you. And Juliet's asked a question, I think probably the final question, which is one for me to answer, I think, which is, how do moments that matter work with existing HR systems? Are they separate or can they be integrated? So from a general perspective, we made sure that nothing was manual if we can automate it. So it should be automated. And one of the challenges we had was, what happens when you can only connect with one HR system or one source of truth? So when we built the Moments engine, which is a lofty title for what sits behind our Moments module, is we can take multiple sources. So in answer to your question, Juliet, we can connect with, say, applicant tracking systems, with core HR systems, with payroll systems, with employee benefits portals, recognition systems, and start taking data feeds on those moments that may not be in one place. We can also take more manual uploads, things like if you have a training system, that's great, but some companies don't. But let's say you go, we have logged who have just attended a large training event, we can bring that in and just enrich the data to create the moments as well. So it's really important that in this day and age that you can connect that data and bring it in, merge it, and then utilize it in system. And I think that is all the questions. So we are at 12:49. So we will wrap this up. I'd like to thank everyone for coming along. And then if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to us. Social media is a great place to reach out to us. You can hop over to our website. We've got a QR code up in the top left, which is if you want to sign up to our newsletter, you can sign up there. Head over to LinkedIn and you can pretty much get in touch with any of us. If you'd like to see more, then you can, of course, jump into our website, which will have contact information for lots and lots of our teams. But thank you very much, Jordan, for coming along and helping people understand moments. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.